Hey there, Emily with Stony Acres Farm in Cary, North Carolina, and you are about to hear part 3 of our interview with our cattle farmers. Let's go. Welcome to segment 3, our final segment with our interview with Victoria and Mackenzie from Crabtree Farm Goods. I hope you went back and watched part 1 and part 2. The interview was almost an hour, and so I broke it into 3 sections that were just easier to watch. This last section, they're going to tell us about how we can find and support local farmers wherever you live. They're also going to talk about the difference between store-bought beef and farm fresh beef. And every time I talk to them, I learned something new. So we hope you enjoy this final segment of our interview. Okay, so one of the things I love about Victoria and Mackenzie is the way they farm. So we sell their beef here because we support how they farm, and every time I talk to them, they're always thinking of the next step or the next idea, or agriculture is a big picture. So you talked about rotating your pasture. What are some other important practices you put into place on your farm?
Something that's been kind of a bigger thing recently is a few years ago we actually got a hay unroller that we can put on the back of the tractor. Mm-hmm. So instead of having to put out a round bale and put a ring on it, we're able to just attach the bale to the back of the tractor and drive forward.
And it unrolls it as you go?
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
So how's that different than dropping it and putting a ring on it?
Yeah, so they both have their times and places. I still use a ring in some situations, but something I really like about the unroller is it distributes the nutrients. So as you unroll the hay, any seeds that are in there, so like grass seeds, they're able to fall down on the ground. So it could kind of help with reseeding your pasture. It provides excellent bedding for young calves, especially in cold weather. Mm-hmm. So that kind of helps them bed down, keep warm. It does a really good job of distributing their food. So instead of all of the cows coming together in one centralized location fighting over it, right. It gives more of them an equal opportunity to eat. And it also is excellent for, when cows eat, they're gonna poop, they're gonna pee. So this does a really good job of distributing, their waste products.
So it's not all around the hay ring.
Yeah, so it's not all around the hay ring. The ground is able to utilize more of that. And there's a few negatives about using a hay ring, and these are kind of the reasons why I don't use it as much now. The number one is when you take cows, which typically weigh, 1,000 to 1,200 pounds, that's a lot of weight on their feet. So when they come to that centralized location at the hay ring to eat, they're going to be trampling down and killing any grass that's right there. We have a lot of wet winters in North Carolina, so you're going to see a lot of the manure, the urine is going to start building up, the ground is being tore up, so you're going to see a lot of mud, and it can be really devastating to the soil health and to the land. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to slowly get away from that when I can, but it still is used, especially if I have a group with just 2 or 3 animals. I probably will put the hay in a ring, because if you spread the hay out in the unrolling situation and they cannot eat it quick enough, then they're going to be pooping and peeing and laying in it too much and just create a big mat of rotten hay that is useless.
Yeah.
One other benefit to unrolling the hay is whatever hay does get left on the ground in the line that you roll, it's trampled in the ground and creates, like she said, a bedding for the grass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it creates like a mulch layer for the grass, which helps retain soil moisture, and it'll biodegrade and increase the organic matter of the soil.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of benefit since we've started unrolling, and seeing, especially during the winter, like this spring, we had better grazing this spring, and it was a lot of the areas that we had only been unrolling. So just that increased mulch layer, which helps retain moisture, and the increased biomass in the soil, plus the reseeding, we saw a lot better regrowth
And that's the thing, I think, when I talk to you guys, is you're so observant of things where you're like, we noticed this, so we tried this. And you're not afraid to try different things, especially multiple generation farmers. You probably have old ways of doing things,
Yeah.
but you're young enough and smart enough to go, well, that's not working. Now, I read in your newsletter, and I thought this was fascinating, that you do vaccinate, but you are very particular, or purposeful, I should say, by what vaccines, right?
Yes.
I'm trying to remember what I read. I just remember reading it and being like, you've really thought this through.
Yeah, so vaccines are actually, to be honest, like we've always vaccinated. As long as I've worked cows with my granddaddy and my dad, to my knowledge, we've always used a vaccine. I think it definitely has been worth it for us. There's a lot of talk and concerns about mRNA vaccines, which is like kind of the big talk right now. So to my knowledge, there are not any mRNA vaccines that have been, deemed safe for beef cattle. So that's not even an option for us.
Okay.
But the vaccines we'll use are going to be a killed virus, a modified live virus, or a toxoid, so like a tetanus toxoid shot. And really, when you're farming, specifically with livestock, you want to try to give them the best care that you can. So it's a whole lot easier to give an animal preventative care than for it to get sick out in pasture. You have to stress it out to get it to a barn, put it in a chute, and then give it treatment that may or may not be effective. It causes, a risk of harm to yourself, a risk of harm to the animal. Even just trying to catch an animal, they can hurt themselves.
And you can't just take them to the vet.
No, you can't. And that's something as farmers that we try to, do our own vetting when we can. We've had enough experience with the cows that the majority of times when one of them becomes injured or sick, we're usually able to take care of them ourselves so that we don't have to call a vet in for a minor issue. So one really big beneficial thing about vaccines is that they can help prevent you to have to use antibiotics. I have never advertised as being an antibiotic-free farm. I do not feed feeds that contain antibiotics, but I do want to have antibiotics on the back burner in case we have an animal that must have antibiotic treatment.
So it's an emergency situation.
Right. I never want an animal to suffer because I'm unwilling to give it the treatment it needs.
Right. But it's not something you do often.
Right. It's not often.
Like people, we don't just go on antibiotics. It's an emergency.
Yeah.
They're so smart. These are just, honestly. Okay. Couple more questions. Where do you see the future of cattle farming? It has changed so much in the past, at least generation or two. So when you forward think your career, because you're really just starting out, both of you, where do you see it going? What changes do you see coming?
Yeah, so with myself, I'm doing direct to consumer beef sales is like my number one outlet. We do sell a few calves at the local sale, so they'll end up being bought by someone and usually taken to a feedlot. But I've tried to kind of find a niche market for myself. It's really hard in North Carolina to try to make a living off of doing cow to calf. That's something that.
So that means that, like, explain what cow to calf is.
Yeah, so cow calf operation is when you breed the cow to the bull, and then she gives birth to the calf, and she raises the calf up until the calf is about 6 months old and is old enough to be weaned and doesn't have to have milk any longer. And then that calf can be put on pasture or can be, sold to another farmer if another farmer is looking to buy some breeding stock or something like that.
Okay, so it's hard to do it that way.
It's very hard,
like,
yes.
Financially, it requires a lot.
Financially and also mentally with stress,
Right.
because you're having to think about, is the cow coming in heat? Is she going to breed? Is the bull going to breed her? You know, is she going to conceive? Is she going to go all 9 months? So a cow has a 9-month gestation just like a human. Are you going to have to assist with the birth? Is the calf going to be born healthy? And then you have everything after that point. Is the calf nursing? Is he able to, you know, eat like he needs to? You think about predator issues. We have a few coyotes, so you have to be mindful of that.
So that's what you do right now. You do that.
We do that, yes.
Okay, so future heading, what would be an option if you wouldn't do that?
So the next.
What do other people do if they don't want to do the whole breeding, like full cycle process?
Yeah, so for most people in the cattle industry, they either do the cow-calf and then they just sell the calves because they don't have means to try to retain the calves and try to finish like we're doing. Or it's an option I've also considered is actually just buying a weaned calf from another producer and growing them on pasture, feeding them out, and then having them processed or resale to a feedlot.
So you're saying there might be more cattle farmers that are not going to continue doing the full circle. They're going to basically pick and choose what works best for them.
I can see that happening. Yeah, I could kind of see that happening in the future because, like I said, the cow-calf it's hard to do. It's more time intensive, but also right now, the cattle commodity prices, with them being as high as they are, you have to think about why are they that high, and it's actually going back to the drought I just spoke of when people were selling their brood cows. I think it was like 2021. So they sold a lot of the brood cows that they would be retaining to have the babies, and it's still affecting us today.
They don't have the babies.
We don't have the cattle. We don't have the cattle inventory that we normally would have. I think we have the lowest inventory we've had, I believe, since like the 1950s or so.
Like your farm?
No,
or
the United States.
Yeah.
Okay. The United States. Yeah, we're definitely at a deficit. And you think about like how much has our human population grown versus the cattle population is decreasing.
Right. So that's a problem.
Yeah, it's an issue.
When you do you buy cows? Like, where do you go to buy a cow?
I normally don't buy one.
If you had to buy a cow.
Yeah, if I buy one, it's usually going to be a breeding bull just to try to get some new genetics in, bring a bull in that's not.
Where do you go? You can't go to the store.
No.
Like, where do you buy a cow?
You can either get one from like the stockyard or just another local producer, or I guess maybe find out about a producer from a breed association.
Okay, so you can, like, do you know people who you could go to if you had to?
But going back to your one question about the future, what is the future of cattle farming like? Well, first thing that comes to my mind is one thing we talk about the most is regenerative farming.
Right. Well, you and I have talked about that.
It's kind of gotten pretty popular, almost kind of like fad category is regenerative farming. But that kind of hits home for me because that goes back to my hunting background.
Right.
Because I followed it's a YouTube channel called Growing Deer TV. And the guy that runs that is Dr. Grant Woods. He has a doctorate degree in wildlife biology. And he started a system 10 or 20 years ago testing the regenerative farming process, but he called it something different. He called it the buffalo system. He's now called it the release process. And all it's doing is the reason he called it the buffalo system was mimicking the Great Plains.
Right.
Is he's planting food plots for white-tailed deer, but the leftover vegetation, he's terminating it with a crimper or a herbicide if there's a lot of weeds, leaving that dying vegetation on the ground and planting right into it, creating the regenerative process. So the biomass and the nutrients from the leftover plants is going back into the soil. And that's one of the main things. See, I hunt, that's my phone.
It's a turkey ringer,
So that's one thing me and her talk about probably the most out of anything we can do to help improve the farm is how can we implement regenerative processes into our farming processes.
And we've talked about, though, it takes a long time.
Yeah.
Years and years and years.
It does.
Which for me, I've been a hunter for so long. It makes sense on how to do it in food plots with wildlife, but with cattle, they eat stuff down more.
Right.
So it's been longer for me to kind of understand how we can implement it. But one thing we'd really like to do at some point is to be able to terminate our perennial grasses in the fields like fescue, because fescue has high nutrient intake. It uses a lot of nutrients, and go to an annual planting cycle. So we plant the pastures in annuals, let the cows rotate it, and just like in the normal rotational grazing, and then they will terminate that plant as they graze it, and then plant it again in the fall. So that way you always have something, a fast-growing plant in the soil, because perennial plants will grow a little bit slower than annuals. So they're putting more nutrients back in the soil because they will die at the end of the season. You always have something growing, and instead of constantly stripping from your soil, turning it just back into dirt, doing the regenerative process, you're actually building soil into the pasture, improving your soil health, balancing your pH, balancing the potassium, the phosphorus, and all that stuff, and the nitrogen.
That requires so much forward thinking and forward planning, and maybe in experiments, right? Like maybe this will work, maybe this wouldn't work. Have you started? I know we had talked about that before. Have you started practicing that in a pasture yet?
We've tried a few things. We did a few experiments. We did really good one year with actually a hay field, because we bought a few acres of land, had a 10-acre hay field, doesn't have any fence on it. We're experimenting with winter crops on what we can plant that will grow but also feed itself. We're experimenting with ryegrass and red clover, because clover is a legume that puts nitrogen into the soil. The first year we did it, it worked very well. I think we got like a little over 6 bales per acre when we did the hay. This past year we had trouble trying to get the drill and lining up when we had time. We planted a lot later, didn't do as good. We've also experimented in the pastures, and we did a lot of research. There's a company I've looked at for wildlife food plot mixes. It's called Green Cover Seeds. I think they're in Nebraska. They have a lot of studies they put out, and then Southeast Agri-Seed actually sent us a study they had showing how standing fescue suppresses these annual crops, which is what we've seen. We've tried to plant the more of feeder varieties, the legumes and stuff that put nitrogen back into the soil in the standing fescue, but they never perform because the fescue just takes them over. It's too much. And the Southeast Agri-Seed sent us a pamphlet, and they actually showed a study to where they planted the same rate of grain sorghum, like milo, in 3 different areas. One, they did nothing. The other one, all they did was terminate the fescue, and the next one, they terminated the fescue and added a certain amount of fertilizer. I don't remember how much. And it was a drastic difference. The stuff with the fescue on it, the milo didn't even grow. And just by terminating the fescue, they had milo that looked to be about 4 feet tall. And with the fertilizer, it was even taller, maybe 6 or 7 feet. But just by terminating that perennial crop that is using so much of the nutrients, because fescue will only get, how high? 12, 16 inches on a good year if you fertilize it.
The leaves.
And fertilizer,
about 16.
Fescue basically requires fertilizer to get a really good, nice, healthy stand. But planting these mixes, and the mixes I'm talking about, you want to have a lot of biodiversity, like 8 to 10 different species. That way something that is very palatable for the cows is always growing. But just by terminating and planting, the grain sorghum was 4 feet tall. I mean, basically twice to 4 times the height that the fescue would be.
So on top of running the farm, on top of working, on top of everything, you're also thinking these things. Like, so you have to continue running your practice as is, because you have to keep it going, while also implementing, what's it called? I always say the word wrong.
Regenerative.
I say regenerative farming. I keep saying you should make a YouTube channel, and you should talk about that, because when you explain it, I understand it, and I wouldn't understand it otherwise. But now hopefully other people will understand it too. Okay. how can people support you and other cattle farmers? And I'm going to tie this into the next question of what do people need to know about buying store-bought beef versus farm fresh beef? Because obviously everyone goes to the grocery store, but not everyone buys farm fresh beef. So is there a difference between the two?
So I'm going to answer the second question first.
Okay.
So yes and no. There are differences, but there are not differences. So I do want everybody to feel confident that whether you buy beef directly from me or from the grocery store, that you are at the end of the day consuming a high protein content source of meat. It is very nutrient dense. It's going to have lots of iron, lots of vitamins and minerals that a lot of protein bars don't have. So I want for you to feel confident in that. So my beef, it's USDA inspected, and the beef you get from the grocery store is also going to be USDA inspected. So they've got a lot of common things. The majority of beef that you get from the grocery store is going to be raised and grown in the United States, but we do also import beef from other countries. So those countries are going to be the ones pretty close to us. So Canada, Brazil, and Mexico. Those are the biggest ones that we get imports from. There has been talk about having a country of origin labeling again. I'm not really sure where that stands, but the last that I heard was you can actually buy beef from the grocery store, and as long as it was packaged and processed in the United States, it can have a product of USA sticker on it.
But it wasn't raised here.
Right. I'm not sure if that still stands. They were talking about possibly taking that off.
Okay.
So yeah, with the imports we have, so you could be getting beef from Mexico, Brazil, Canada, Argentina, Australia, wherever, that is brought in through these big box packing plants, and that's going to be product that is, especially think of ground beef, is going to be ground up and going to be, who knows, it could have parts of a cow from the U.S., Brazil, and Argentina all in one pack.
It all in one pack.
Yeah, so one pack of ground beef from the grocery store, it's no telling how many different animals that has in it, pretty much.
Okay.
Versus myself, so I raise the calf on the farm, I take it to the processor, they're gonna do their USDA inspection on it, they're gonna do their 14-day dry age, so that's gonna help your eating experience, gonna provide you a higher quality cut of beef to eat. And then they're going to cut that, vacuum seal it, and flash freeze it. And something I really like about the vacuum seal and the flash freeze is as soon as the meat is cut, they're going to go right ahead, they're going to package it up so no bacteria can get in it, and they're going to freeze it, and that is going to ensure that you have a long freezer life. So a lot of times our products can last anywhere between like 3 to 5 years as long as it remains frozen and the seal does not get broken. Versus the grocery store, I especially think about with poultry, you have fresh chicken at the grocery store that most of the time is actually frozen when you pick it up off of the shelf. They have just taken it out to thaw.
Yep.
I'm not exactly sure how they do that with the beef industry, but I do know that meat can be sitting on the shelf for a while before a consumer is to get it and take it home and either prepare it to consume or repackage it to freeze.
Okay. And yours is not?
No, it's not.
It's frozen.
Yeah, it's
right
frozen. And I want to encourage people not to be afraid to eat products that have been vacuum sealed and frozen as soon as they're processed, just like ours.
Yeah.
Because that's actually going to lock in the freshness for you. It's not sitting on the counter degrading. As soon as that beef is taken out of the cooler from aging and is processed, it is going to start degrading unless you freeze it or have some other means to preserve it.
And the flash freezing of the meat is very important because of the cellular structure. When you flash freeze it, that preserves the cell. It doesn't allow it to rupture
Right,
because
right.
it's frozen fast.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's how Bird's Eye Food got its start. Is the guy, his last name was Bird. He discovered that process about flash freezing. And that's how Bird's Eye Foods got started.
Is that vegetables?
It is.
Yeah.
The vegetables.
But to add on to what Victoria's talking about is the difference of our product versus the grocery store is also how it's raised. We've talked a lot about what Victoria does on a daily basis to raise the cattle, but most of the stuff you'll see in the grocery store has primarily been raised and finished in a feedlot,
Yeah.
not on pasture.
Yeah.
In a confined space, all they get is like a silage or some type of feed mix
Yeah.
dumped out of a truck, and they eat out of a trough. They're not on pasture.
Yeah.
Are they ever on pasture, I wonder? Or they just live?
So yeah, they are.
They
Once they're born, they're usually, on pasture with their moms, and
Okay.
then after they're weaned,
Right.
a lot of times they're taken to other pasture, and then they'll be taken off of that and then taken to the feedlot.
And the quality of life of the cow reflects in the taste of the beef.
It can,
Yeah.
yeah.
If it's not stressed out or
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you think about like a feedlot. I'm thinking about in our situations with our cattle being pasture raised, they're able to go seek shelter so they can go get up under the trees, kind of cool off. A feedlot is not going to have trees in it. They've probably got some other shade structures, but you're not going to see as natural of an environment. You're going to see a lot of dust kick up, which actually is something I have seen a little bit recently. It's been so dry at our place.
Yep.
They've been kicking so much dust up that a few of them are kind of have a little cough here and there. And you're going to see a lot of that kind of stuff in a feedlot. And when a cow gets a respiratory disease like that, if it gets bad enough, you will end up having to give it antibiotics for treatment.
So you want to prevent that.
Yeah, you want to prevent that.
So how can people support you, other cattle farmers? How can we do that?
Yeah, so I would really recommend, if you can, to try to support a local cattle farmer. So try to support somebody like myself, or maybe you've got a neighbor down the road that has some calves.
We're city people. We don't have a neighbor down the road. So farmers markets?
Yes, farmers markets are great.
Okay.
Yeah, you can look on Facebook, maybe try to search in a local group. So like I'm from Orange County, so Orange County local, something like that. Try to find a source like that. But I would really recommend to try to source beef locally when you can. But I also want you to have confidence that anytime you buy beef that you are supporting a cattle farmer somewhere.
Okay. That's important.
Yes.
So if they wanted to get a hold of you, if you live in the Raleigh area, how can they get a hold of you? How can they find Crabtree Farm Goods?
So right now we do our farm pickups, so customers can order online from our website. It's www.crabtreefarmgoods.com, and you can select a date and time that you would like to pick up. We offer our beef. We offer everything from, if you just want 1 pound of ground beef, to one of our variety packages. So a variety package is going to be a bag that's going to come with an assortment of cuts. One of them is called the #1 sampler pack. So it's going to come with some ground beef, some stew beef, hamburger patties, a roast, and some steaks. That's a really good bundle to start off with. A lot of people really like that. And then if you're wanting to fill your freezer up, we can do a quarter, a half, or a whole beef, and I can get that customized for you. I charge based on the hang weight, and I include my processing fees in that. So you just pay a flat fee, and I can get it cut however which way you would like.
And how often do you offer big portions of a cow like that?
I usually have them available once to twice a month, but
Okay.
I do recommend people to try to plan in advance, because a lot of times those do get picked up a couple months before they're ready. Or, they get claimed a couple months before they're ready.
So you can order directly online. You also have meetups like we had here today, which is MEAT, which I love. So we're right by downtown Cary. We do this. We do it about every quarter right now.
Yeah.
Hoping to do it more. We restock our freezer at our farm store with their beef. It sells pretty quickly. But you do other meetups as well. So where do you meet up also?
Yeah, so I do a meetup in Roxborough Tractor Supply. That's going to be the first Saturday of every month, and the pickup time is from 10 to 10:30. You can meet me in the parking lot. Just remember to place an order online a few days before. I also offer that for Hillsboro, so that's Hillsboro Tractor Supply from 10 to 10:30. And I also have a few stores that I sell to. I sell to Luxor's Farm Market on the intersection of 119 and 49. They have a great assortment of local produce and some other local products. So I'm very thankful for them. Robert's Service Mart in Bushy Fork also carries my products. They have ground beef, hamburger patties, bratwurst, roast, cube steak. And then the Country Store in Hurdle Mills, they carry my hamburger patties and my ground beef.
Mm-hmm. The ground beef, like I think we got a load today. It'll be sold out by next week. People love the ground beef, the patties. The garlic brats are our favorite. The regular brats, chorizo. It's all good. It's all amazing. I want to thank you guys for talking because they came here for the meetup and I kept them for this interview. So that was so gracious of them. And every time I talk to them, I'm just amazed at how smart they are and how proactive they are with cattle farming. And it blows my mind and I wish we lived closer. But we have dinner dates planned, I hear. We're going to hang out for dinner. So I'm just going to get all the goodness.
I think we've got some arrangements in the works.
I know.
I hope you enjoyed this part of the interview with Mackenzie and Victoria from Crabtree Farm Goods. If you want to get a hold of them, you can visit their website at crabtreefarmgoods.com. They're also on Instagram and Facebook. If you don't live in the Raleigh area and you want to find a local farmer to support, you can find them at MeatSuite, MEATSUITE.com and localharvest.org. You can also follow us at Stony Acres NC on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Thanks for watching.